So, here he is in the flesh, Saint Nerona Imu, and his greatest ally, Phil Leotardo. Actually, Imu seemingly has the same fur belt that both Rox and Loki have, but I don't really know if there's any connection here. Maybe it's just a fashion design that Oda really got hooked on in this arc. And Imu's dialogue here is really cool because he himself should know the situation on Elbaf, that Harald is gone and that they don't have a new king, because Imu himself was trying to make Dorian Broggie the new king of Elbaf. So what the heck, does he have dementia? I love the brutality of Imu cutting actual fingers off Gerd, but her delayed reaction for multiple panels gives me really big Ope Ope no Mi vibes. And this is the case with a lot of Imu's abilities, where whether it's him bringing the houses and the trees alive, or him cutting off the limbs of other people, it seems like he has the abilities or the properties of so many different devil fruits that we've seen in the story. But it's all a bit vague still. Like for example, one difference is that Gerd actually still bleeds after getting her fingers chopped off. Even though the thing with the Ope Ope no Mi is that the cuts don't make the character bleed. So it's very mysterious. But when it comes to this quote-unquote arrow ability that Imu uses, I'm not sure if it's the arrow ability that we saw with Kunko. We only see one arrow with actual Imu, so this might just be his tail in his demonic form. And yeah, Roronoa Zoro, the first Straw Hat to actually attack Imu, at least in this form, but not the first character in the story to attack Imu. That honor still goes to Sabo. And hey, Sabo actually got to be on that legendary page at the end of Vegapunk's speech and not Zoro. So sit down, Zoro. You're not one of the final players. I'm being sarcastic. This Omen ability that Imu uses like as a projectile is so weird, since later in the chapter he uses it on both the God's Knights, Somers and Gillingham, and it's not an attack, it actually helps them. The word Omen definitely brings to mind future sight, or prophecies, or even some Basil Hawkins shenanigans, but the way Imu is using it is very hard to interpret. Haryuden, even though you're not the best fighter, it's definitely not for your lack of muscles, so he's kind of like real-life bodybuilders. I'm surprised that Imu is so in a hurry, saying that there's no time to waste. So I guess the plan still is that whatever is going down in the Holy Land is very urgent. It's an emergency. So they really need to pacify Elbaf quick and use its military power to help out the Holy Land as fast as possible. Really interesting that Imu, when he was possessing Gungo's body, had different wings. Like the wings in that form were more demonic. These wings are more similar to King and the Lunarian's wings. There's definitely some really strong angelic vibes here with Imu, where it's not only the angelic wings, but it's also the literal halo above his head. So yeah, kind of like Satan from the Bible, Imu might be a fallen angel of some kind. I like this quote from this one random giant. I've had enough of all the fires and collapsing buildings. This could be said by any NPC in basically any One Piece arc. So I'm glad that somebody finally said it. See, I'm still convinced that the fight between Somers and Sanji is going to happen in this arc. So I wish I would have made videos about this earlier in the year, where I don't think either Somers or Gillingham is still defeated, like they still have their fights in this arc yet to come. I think the most interesting thing about Gaban saying that he hasn't felt hockey like this since God Valley is that among all his adventures with Roger, God Valley really was the craziest stuff that Gaban ever encountered. At least as far as hockey goes. Nothing, not Prime Whitebeard, not Prime Shiki, nobody really compared to the hockey madness that was Domino vs. Rocks or Imu going crazy on God Valley. Except today, with Saint Nerona Imu landing on Elbaf. Gaban really couldn't have chosen a better place to retire. This is so cool that it's not only Luffy who's recovering by eating, but it's also Loki and the Chipmunk. Because we very rarely see any of this. It's almost always exclusively Luffy who gets back energy by eating, even though we know, like for example from some of Sanji's cooking, that food literally makes you stronger in the One Piece universe. Well, special kind of food. Yes, once again, Jinbei shows that he's one of the few non-monster trio Straw Hats who actually has observation haki. Even though Frankie has come this far, he doesn't have haki, for whatever reason. Even though freaking Diamante has haki and freaking Becomes has haki, but Frankie doesn't. I just really love that during the Straw Hat's first encounter with the King of the World, it's the wings of the Pirate King who make the first attacks. But what's even more interesting is Imu actually kicking Sanji back, which is so cool and gives me so many ideas. One is that Imu actually seems to know some martial arts, which is really unexpected from a guy who just stays in a flower room 24 hours a day. But it also reminds me of what Imu said before, which is that he doesn't like dirtying his hands. You know who else doesn't like dirtying their hands? It's Sanji, because he's a cook. So does Imu have the same rule, where, okay, he actually prefers using his feet in a fight? Sounds kind of weird. I also hope that when we see Shanks fighting the next time, in like 500 chapters or something, he's also going to show some martial arts skill. I do realize that we've seen these black flames ever since like Saturn on Egghead, where all of the celestial dragons who've made these covenants with Imu have the same aesthetic with their demonic abilities. But who else in One Piece has black flames? It's usually the Haki black lightning effect, but black flames, I can't really remember anything. And Imu's saying that he's here to find the one responsible for Harald is interesting. We knew that he hadn't made the connection before, like 14 years ago. So I guess this is finally when Imu understood that Loki was the person who killed Harald, which he for some reason didn't see with the telepathic link 14 years ago. I guess he had bad reception or something. But is this really his target, his priority, to avenge Harald? Because Imu, you have bigger fish to fry at the moment. And yeah, ever since his introduction, the one thing about Loki is that even though he's a huge fan of Rocksteady Sebek, and even though he has a really negative relationship with the other giants, Loki is still a man of Elbaf, true and true. And if you ask me, Haryuden doesn't really seem like a wartime leader. So I think the giants should pretty much crown Loki at the end of this arc. Haryuden is not a wartime consigliere. And the final, most interesting thing about Imu is the mark on the back of his cloak, which is the mark of the Covenant, given to all of the celestial dragons who've made a pact with Imu. For quite a few days now I've been working on a script that Saint Nerona Imu is not actually the real Imu, but simply the body of one of the founding kings that he's been using since the Void Century. And if I actually manage to get the video out before the next chapter, I should probably include this detail here, because Imu having this mark could really suggest that this is actually the case, and this is not the real Imu, explaining, for example, why he didn't know that there was no king on Elbaf. So yeah, thank you very much to all my members for still supporting my channel, or I guess channels, and thank you to everyone for watching this video to the end. Bye bye.